At her table, my daughter-in-law told me to go beg for a room at a shelter. The room went silent. My son stared at his plate, and my granddaughter's eyes filled with shame. I didn't argue. I didn't flinch. That night, I opened her mortgage file and began planning her eviction. Before we start the story, tell me where you're tuning in from. And don't forget to subscribe. The Carter dining room gleamed under too bright chandelier light, every crystal drop reflecting Madison's curated perfection. The table was staged for Instagram. Matte black plates, eucalyptus branches running down the center, a candle with a French name flickering just enough to make the wine glasses sparkle. But behind the curated elegance, tension throbbed. Helen could smell it, not just the garlic butter wafting from the bread basket, but the faint metallic tang of financial stress. Madison cut into her salmon with the precision of a surgeon and the venom of a snake. Groceries keep getting higher every week, she sighed, voice pitched for pity. Not to mention utilities. Everything's just such a strain. Her nails, coffin-shaped, glossy nude, tapped against her wineglass. And with extra people in the house, it adds up. Helen didn't react. She dabbed the corner of her mouth with her napkin, listening as if she were taking notes in a courtroom. Ryan shifted in his chair. Mads. But Madison was already pushing forward, eyes glinting. I just think it's fair that everyone contributes. You know, pays their way. Lily looked down at her plate, picking at the edge of a roasted potato. Helen folded her hands neatly on the table. I'd be glad to chip in for groceries, she said evenly. I know the bills must be steep. Madison's smile tightened. Too tight. Oh, that's not really the point. She set her fork down, leaning forward. Helen, maybe it's time you thought about alternatives. Like a senior community, or... Her eyes sparkled with cruelty, her voice a whisper dipped in poison. A shelter. Why don't you go beg for a room at one? The room froze. Ryan stared at his plate like it might save him. His shoulders sank, a coward's hunch. He didn't lift his head. Lily's fork clattered against her dish. Her lips parted as though she might speak, but no words came. She blinked hard, trying not to cry. Helen finished her wine. One slow sip. The glass touched the table with a soft click. No anger, no gasp, no raised voice. She rose, adjusted the sleeve of her blazer, and folded her napkin with surgical precision. Dinner was adequate, she said. Her voice was calm enough to be mistaken for polite, but the way she left the napkin on the plate, not beside it, was a verdict. Without another word, Helen walked out. Her heels struck the hardwood with perfect rhythm. Click, click, click. Each step like a countdown to something only she could hear. The front door closed softly. Not a slam. Not a retreat. A seal. At home, the air was still. No curated candles, no laughter lacquered over cruelty. Just silence. Her silence. Helen slipped off her coat and walked straight to her study. The safe in the corner creaked open with practiced ease. She reached inside and pulled a thick folder bound in a faded elastic band. She carried it to her desk, laying it flat like a case file. Across the top, Madison Carter, Mortgage Application, 2019. Her own signature marked the underwriting page. Helen's fingers smoothed the edges. Her eyes flicked over interest rates, balloon payments, the fine print she had once drafted herself. The papers whispered of fragility, of arrogance, of cracks no Instagram filter could conceal. Helen tapped one manicured finger against the page. Madison thought she'd written Helen out of the family picture. But Helen had written the contract on her life, and now she would rewrite it. She thought I was powerless. She forgot I'd built my life on contracts. The desk lamp buzzed faintly, spilling yellow light across a battlefield of paper. Mortgage applications, tax liens, escrow adjustments, documents that to Madison looked like dull paperwork. But to Helen, they were weapons. Each line of fine print a scalpel, each payment history a wound waiting to bleed. Helen spread the pages like a surgeon preparing instruments. The house had been hers once, at least on paper, when Madison and Ryan begged for a loan. Helen had underwritten it herself, ensuring the numbers balanced, ensuring her son could have a fresh start. And now, 3 years later, the cracks were showing. Late payments, 3 of them, tucked into footnotes, an interest rate climbing like a noose tightening, a balloon clause scheduled for next spring. The kind of clause that buried amateurs. Helen uncapped a red pen, circle, slash, note. Each mark was less about discovery, more about confirmation. Madison had built her empire on air, and Helen was finally measuring the weight. She leaned back, eyes narrowed, lips set in a thin line. Then she picked up her phone. The line clicked once. Victor Ramirez, a deep voice answered, calm but edged. Victor, Helen said smoothly, I want to talk for closure. There was a pause. Not surprise exactly. More a measured silence, like an attorney bracing for the storm. On who? My daughter-in-law, Madison Carter. You remember the file? Papers rustled as Helen flipped to the signature page. She's 3 payments behind, tax liens unpaid, balloon payment coming. She's hanging by a thread. Victor exhaled slowly. Helen, this isn't small stuff. You're talking about buying debt. It's bloodless, but it isn't cheap. Helen's voice didn't flinch. Neither was her insult. For a moment, only the soft hum of the lamp filled the room. Then Victor chuckled, low, knowing. You haven't changed. Cold as ever. Helen capped her pen and stacked the file into a perfect square. Cold as efficient. Bring every paper, Victor said finally. His voice had sharpened into business mode. We'll gut her illusions line by line. If she thinks she owns that house, she's about to meet her real landlord. Helen allowed herself the faintest smile. Not vindictive, not smug, just certain. She thought insults were free. I knew how to bill them back. Victor's office smelled like old leather and sharp cologne, the kind of place where settlements were drafted and lives were quietly undone. The blinds were half drawn, muting the Dallas sun into thin slats of light across the conference table. Helen walked in without hesitation, her heels a steady metronome on polished floors. She wasn't here for advice. She was here for execution. Victor rose, buttoning his charcoal suit jacket. Helen Carter, he said with a smile that was more respect than warmth. Haven't aged a day, except maybe sharper around the eyes. Helen slid the thick mortgage file across the table and sat. Flattery wastes time. Read. Victor smirked, lowering into his chair. He flipped through the documents, page after page, his pen scratching margin notes in clean, lethal strokes. When he reached the repayment history, his brows arched. 3 late payments, he said. Escrow imbalance. And here, tax liens stacking like Jenga. This loan isn't stable. It's over-leveraged. He shut the file with a soft thud. One push and she falls. Helen's eyes gleamed like ice under glass. Then I'll be the push. Victor leaned back, studying her. You always did like precision. She wanted me in a shelter, Helen said, voice even. She'll be lucky to afford one herself when I'm done. Victor steepled his fingers. You're not talking about a simple foreclosure. You're talking about buying the debt outright. That means dealing with the bank, taking on the lien, making yourself the note holder. Translation? Helen asked. You won't just have the option to foreclose. You'll own the mortgage, which means, in a very real sense, you'll own her. Helen didn't flinch. Perfect. Victor's lips curved. Cold. I like it. He opened a drawer and slid a set of preliminary forms across to her. The bank will sell the note at a discount since it's high risk. You cut a check, and suddenly Madison's leash is in your hands. Helen uncapped her pen, tested the ink, and wrote her name with deliberate precision. I underwrote the original loan. I know its skeleton. This isn't a gamble. It's a reclamation. Victor tapped the folder. Helen, once you sign this, you'll be her creditor. Not her mother-in-law. Don't confuse the two. I won't, she said flatly. She did the confusing when she thought my silence was weakness. For a moment, the room was still, just the hum of the air conditioner and the soft shuffle of papers. Victor studied her like a general weighing a new weapon. Then he chuckled. I almost pity her. Almost. Helen reached for her checkbook. Her hand was steady, her handwriting sharp. She wrote the first number of the sum without blinking. As the ink dried, she looked up, her tone almost amused. By the time Madison realizes who her landlord is, it'll be too late. Victor gathered the papers into a neat stack, sealing them into a leather folder. Congratulations, Helen. You've just bought yourself an enemy's roof. Helen stood, smoothing the sleeve of her blazer. No, she corrected, voice razor clean. I bought myself the right to take it away. They offered me scraps. I left them silence instead. The Carter dining room looked staged again, but this time even Helen could see the seams. The candles were mismatched heights, the flowers wilting at the edges. And the air smelled faintly of takeout disguised as home cooking. The chicken parmesan on her plate wore the marks of a plastic container, not a casserole dish. Madison poured herself wine with exaggerated grace. So glad you could make it tonight, Helen. Family dinners are so important. Her smile was sugar-coated, but the bitterness leaked through. She lifted her glass high. To relevance. May we all keep it as long as possible. Helen raised her water glass, silent. The toast landed hollow. Ryan fiddled with his fork, laughing too quickly, too nervously. You're always so witty, Mads. Madison's eyes flicked toward Helen. Well, you know how it is. Some people just overstay their relevance, don't know when to step aside. The words hung in the air like smoke. Helen cut a precise bite of chicken, chewed once, and placed her fork down neatly. She dabbed her mouth with her napkin, the motion as exact as a judge's gavel. Across the table, Lily's chair scraped suddenly against the hardwood. She stood without a word, her face pale, and left the room. The slam of her bedroom door echoed louder than Madison's smugness. Madison sipped her wine, feigning innocence. Teenagers. So dramatic. Ryan chuckled weakly. Yeah, dramatic. Helen looked at him, just long enough for his eyes to drop. Then she looked at Madison, but said nothing. Instead, she took a second bite, swallowed, reached for her glass of water. And then she folded her napkin with surgical care, placed it on the plate, and stood. You're leaving already? Madison asked, eyebrows raised. We're just getting to dessert. Helen slipped on her coat, smoothing the sleeves. Enjoy it, she said simply. Her heels clicked down the hallway, steady, final. The front door closed with a hush. Not a slam. Silence heavier than any argument. That night, Helen slept soundly. Not because the insult hadn't stung, but because she'd already written the response. Not in words, in ink. The very next morning, the envelope arrived at Madison's mailbox. Delivered with bureaucratic indifference. Inside, a single-page notice, stamped and sealed. Mortgage ownership transfer. New lender of record, Helen Carter. Madison found it mid-morning, still in her robe, coffee cooling on the counter. She tore the envelope open, scanned the words once, then again. Her face drained of color. Ryan, she shouted, storming into his office where he sat hunched over emails. She slapped the letter against his desk. "What the hell is this?" Ryan skimmed the notice. His lips moved as he read, confusion sliding into disbelief. It says, your mother's the lender now." Madison's chest heaved. "No. It says she owns me." Ryan swallowed hard. "Mads, this doesn't make sense." "Oh, it makes perfect sense," Madison hissed. "She thinks she can humiliate me. She thinks she can put a leash around my neck." Her voice cracked, more from panic than rage. "Well, she's wrong." But as she looked at the notice again, her hands shook. Because deep down, beneath the fury, she knew. Helen didn't bluff. And if Helen held the leash, the collar was already locked. She thought the bank held her leash. She didn't know I'd bought it. The door to Ryan's office slammed so hard the frames on the wall rattled. Madison stormed in, hair undone, silk robe flaring behind her like a cape. She slapped the notice down on his desk, the paper crumpling under her palm. "Explain this." Ryan looked up from his laptop, startled. He smoothed the page flat, reading each line. His lips moved quietly as though repeating the words might make them less true. "It says, your mortgage has been reassigned," he muttered. "The new lender of record is Mom." Madison's eyes were wild, her pulse hammering at her throat. "No, it doesn't say she's the lender. It says she owns me." Ryan leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. "Maybe it's a mistake." "Mistake?" Madison laughed bitterly, pacing the office like a caged animal. "Your mother doesn't make mistakes. She plans them." Ryan rubbed his temples. "Madison!" "She's declaring war," Madison snapped, "and she thinks she can win because she has a few old papers in a drawer." Ryan's voice was low, pleading. "She's my mom. Maybe she just wants to make a point." Madison turned on him, her eyes sharp as glass. "A point? She just bought the roof over our heads." "You're not in the middle, Ryan. You're under her thumb, same as me." The silence after her words was heavier than the slam of the door. Meanwhile, Helen was already on the move. She drove slowly past the house she once helped her son buy, a notebook in her lap, pen clicking softly with each turn. The lawn looked manicured from a distance, but Helen knew better. She'd always known better. From the curb, she saw it. The subtle sag of the roofline, the gutter separating from the fascia. She parked across the street, stepping out in her tailored coat. Her heels crunched over loose gravel as she walked closer, eyes scanning like a building inspector. The front steps had shifted slightly, hairline cracks fanning across the concrete. In the side yard, the wooden siding bubbled, a telltale sign of termites. Helen wrote quickly, her script neat and efficient. Roof, compromised, plumbing, leaking at foundation, termites, probable. She crouched near a spigot, running her gloved hand beneath it. Moisture clung, the faint scent of mold rising. Behind her, a curtain fluttered. Madison, glaring from inside, phone pressed to her ear. Helen didn't look up. She didn't need to. She clicked her pen shut and returned to her car. Later that evening, she sat in Victor's office again, the notebook open between them. Victor skimmed her notes, nodding slowly. Roof sagging, plumbing damage, termites. You've got a full arsenal here. He leaned back, tapping the edge of the page. Helen, you hold every card. Helen folded her hands in her lap. Then it's time to play one. Victor pulled a folder from his briefcase, sliding it toward her. First demand letter. Pay past due balance within 30 days, or we proceed. Helen took the pen without hesitation. Proceed. The scratch of ink against paper was quiet but absolute, like the first drop of rain before a flood. Victor's smile was small, approving. Cold. Precise. Just like I remember you. Helen closed the folder, her voice steady as ever. This isn't revenge, Victor. This is reclamation. She wanted me begging for shelter. She rose, slipping her coat back over her shoulders. Now she'll beg me for mercy. The demand letter sat on the marble countertop like a bomb no one wanted to touch. Its sharp black print carried Helen's signature at the bottom. Neat, deliberate, final. Madison skimmed it once, twice, her pulse rising with every line. Balance due, 28,167.56. Deadline, 30 days. Penalty clause, compounding interest, effective immediately. Her hands shook. The paper slipped from her grip, sliding across the counter. She's insane, Madison muttered. She's actually insane. Ryan picked it up, rereading like the words might change. His voice was thin, brittle. She's not insane, Madison. She's thorough. Madison spun on him. Then fix it. Call the bank, call your boss, I don't care. Just fix it. That night, desperation turned into action. Madison sat cross-legged on the floor of their bedroom, surrounded by handbags. Chanel, Louis Vuitton, Hermes. Each one photographed under a ring light, listed online with fake cheer. Gently used, nearly new, price to move. The room smelled of expensive leather and panic. Every click of the camera was another chip of her pride, another reminder that Helen had forced her to pawn the identity she'd built online. Meanwhile, Ryan hunched over his laptop at the kitchen table, eyes hollow from lack of sleep. His email draft glared back at him. Subject: Request for salary advance. His finger hovered over send. He imagined the look on his boss's face, pity at best, suspicion at worst. But he hit send anyway. In the shadows of the upstairs hallway, Lily sat on the carpet, hugging her knees. She listened as voices rose and cracked downstairs. You should have planned better, Madison hissed. You spend faster than I earn, Ryan snapped. Don't you dare blame me. A glass shattered. Silence followed, then more muffled arguing. Lily pressed her forehead against her knees, eyes wet. She wasn't supposed to hear this, but in a house built on appearances, the walls carried every fracture. Across town, Helen sat at her desk with Victor on speakerphone. The smell of fresh ink lingered as she signed another adjustment. Penalty clause enacted, she said, sliding the paper into a folder. Increase late fees by 5%. Victor chuckled. She's already choking on the balance. Helen's voice was calm, almost serene. Then let her choke. Every gasp is a reminder. She thought she could bury me. Now she's the one digging. She poured herself a cup of tea, steam curling like smoke. To Helen, this wasn't revenge. It was arithmetic. Cold, clean, undeniable. The next morning, Madison posted a smiling photo on Instagram. Hair curled, latte in hand, belly framed by a designer dress. Caption: Manifesting abundance. Everything always works out. The comments flooded in. Queen energy. So inspiring. Positive vibes only. But Helen, sipping her tea across town, saw the cracks. Madison's eyes looked just a little too wide, her smile stretched too thin. A woman pretending the walls weren't closing in. 2 weeks later, the deadline had shrunk from 30 days to 15. Ryan's request for an advance was denied. Madison's bags sold, but the money barely touched the balance. Bills piled up on the counter. Past due. Final notice. Warning. In the quiet of her study, Helen laid out the next move with surgical precision. The foreclosure papers waited in a neat stack, clipped at the corner. She signed, the pen gliding across the page. The sound was soft, but in her ears it was thunder. The countdown had begun. The courthouse was cool, sterile, and indifferent. The kind of place where families unraveled in signatures and stamps. Helen sat at Victor's side as the clerk shuffled the foreclosure packet, flipping through pages without emotion. Filed, the clerk said at last, stamping the final page with a heavy thunk. That sound wasn't paper. It was a countdown. Victor slid the documents back into his briefcase. 60 days, Helen. That's the clock. Helen nodded once. Plenty of time for them to squirm. By the following afternoon, the first notice went up. The sheriff's deputy hammered the paper to the Carters' front door, each strike of the nail echoing down the manicured street. Neighbors peeked through blinds. A dog barked. When Madison opened the door and saw the posting, her scream cut through the cul-de-sac like sirens. "Ryan!" she shrieked, voice cracking. "Ryan, get out here!" He stumbled into the foyer, tie askew, face pale. He read the notice once, his lips moving silently. Foreclosure proceedings initiated, property sale scheduled in 60 days. Madison snatched the paper, crumpling it in her fists. "Fix it!" she screamed, jabbing the crumpled notice against his chest. "You fix it, or we're finished." Ryan just stood there, chest heaving, the words caught in his throat. That evening, he showed up at Helen's door. She was in her study, a record spinning softly, Ella Fitzgerald, low and smooth. When she answered, Ryan looked like a man already evicted, eyes sunken, tie loosened, desperation dripping off him like sweat. "Mom, please," he said, stepping inside without waiting. "Please don't do this." Helen gestured toward the chair across from her desk. "Sit down." He sat, leaning forward, hands clasped. "We'll get the money. We just need more time. Madison's selling things. I asked my boss for help. We'll figure it out." Helen poured herself a cup of tea, the kettle hissing like punctuation. She set it down gently before replying. "I considered the shelter," she said, her voice flat. "The one your wife suggested for me." Ryan froze. His eyes darted to hers, searching for some crack of softness. He found none. "Mom, you made your choice," she said evenly. "Now I'm making mine." Later that night, Lily sat on the edge of Helen's bed, knees pulled to her chest. Her voice was small, trembling. "Grandma, are you serious? You're really going to take their house?" Helen brushed a strand of hair from Lily's face. "I'm not taking, sweetheart. I'm reclaiming. They thought cruelty was currency. Now they'll learn what real debt feels like." Lily didn't reply. She just leaned against her grandmother, silent, torn between love and fear. By morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. Some whispered sympathy for Madison, others called it karma. Madison, of course, had her own strategy. Phone propped up, mascara streaked. She went live on Instagram. Her voice quavered as she looked into the camera. "This is what happens when bitter old hags can't let go. My mother-in-law is trying to destroy us, while I'm pregnant, while we're building a future." She sniffled for effect, hand resting on her stomach. Thousands watched. Comments poured in. "So cruel. How could she?" "Stay strong, Mama." Madison wiped her tears, then leaned closer to the lens, her tone dropping into venom. "She thinks she's powerful. She has no idea what she started. She wanted sympathy. I gave her silence. And the internet gave her fire." Madison's video spread fast. Within hours, reposts cluttered Facebook feeds, TikTok clips stitched her teary face with dramatic music, and Twitter hashtags spun their own narrative. Pregnant and evicted. Save Madison. In the opening shot, Madison sobbed in her nursery. Pale blue walls, a crib assembled in the corner, half-finished mobiles swaying above her. "She's trying to destroy us," she wept into the camera. "My own mother-in-law. A bitter old woman who doesn't care that I'm carrying her grandchild." The comments poured in. Thousands of them. "Monster mill. How could she evict family?" "Stay strong, Mama." Madison dabbed her eyes with a silk sleeve, pouting at the lens. "But I'm not giving up. We'll manifest abundance. We'll survive." Her followers ate it up, at first. Across town, Helen scrolled once, twice, then locked her phone. She poured tea, steam curling upward. The internet was noise, and Helen had mastered the art of silence. When Victor called, his voice carried amusement under its professionalism. "Have you seen her latest performance?" "She's crying into wallpaper samples," Helen said dryly. "She just opened herself up to defamation," Victor replied. "Accusing you of harassment and cruelty without evidence? That's reckless." Helen stirred her tea slowly. "She confuses volume with power, but the louder she screams, the more receipts I'll collect." Victor chuckled. "And you know how to use them." Meanwhile, inside the Carter house, Lily sat curled on her bed, headphones in, scrolling through the storm. Her friends had already sent her the clips. "Is it true your grandma's kicking you out?" "Wow. Your mom is savage online." Tears welled in her eyes, but she typed back only 3 words. "She's not wrong." When Madison barged in later, checking her phone compulsively, Lily kept her head down. "Don't listen to anything your grandma tells you," Madison snapped. "She's jealous, bitter. She wants to ruin us." Lily finally looked up, her eyes hard. "She's the only one who hasn't lied to me." Madison froze, jaw tightening. But Lily turned back to her homework, shutting the conversation down. Ryan stayed silent. At work, he ducked glances from coworkers who had seen Madison's videos. At home, he hovered in doorways while his wife live-streamed, unable to speak up, unable to defend his mother, unable to stop the unraveling. At night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the sounds of Madison rehearsing sympathy echoing from the nursery. "Look at the crib," she whispered to the camera, tears shining. "How could anyone throw us out with a baby on the way?" The crib sat empty. Her performance didn't. Helen didn't watch the full video. She didn't need to. But her phone buzzed that evening with a notification. Not public, not loud. Instagram DM, anonymous. She opened it. "Want to know what Madison says when you're not around?" Attached was an audio file, just a few seconds long. Helen pressed play. Madison's voice, laughing, low, cruel. "That hag will drop dead before she ever takes this house, and when she does, I'll dance on her grave." Helen sat back in her chair, the words playing again in her mind. Not anger, not shock, just confirmation. The internet wanted a villain. Madison had just written her own script. The recording was short, less than 10 seconds, but it carried the weight of a hammer blow. Helen replayed it once, then again, the hiss of Madison's laugh curling through her study like smoke. "That hag will drop dead before she ever takes this house, and when she does, I'll dance on her grave." Helen's face remained composed, but her hand, resting on the arm of her chair, clenched, knuckles whitening against the polished wood. Not shock, not hurt, just confirmation. The door creaked, and Lily's voice broke the silence. "Grandma?" Helen clicked the file closed, but not fast enough. Lily had heard the tail end of the recording. Her eyes widened, tears welling. "She really hates you," Lily whispered, as if saying it too loudly would make it cut deeper. Helen turned to her granddaughter, her expression unreadable. "Not me." Her voice was calm, even surgical. "The judge will hear it." For the first time, Lily smiled through the sadness. It wasn't joy. It was recognition. She saw her grandmother's steel. The next morning, Helen sat in Victor's office again. The blinds were half open, letting light stripe across the table like bars of a cage. She slid her phone across to him, the recording cued. Victor pressed play. The laughter filled the room, followed by Madison's words dripping venom. When it ended, Victor leaned back in his chair, exhaling through his teeth. "This isn't just fuel, Helen. This is gasoline." She posted crying videos begging for sympathy, and now we have proof she's been mocking you privately. Helen folded her hands. "It seals the narrative." Victor nodded. "Exactly. to a judge, to the court of public opinion. She's done. And to Lily. He glanced at her meaningfully. You've just given her the truth she needed. That night, the house on Madison Street was a powder keg. Lily sat in her room, earbuds in, but the walls carried voices. Madison shrieking, Ryan pacing. You think she won't use it? Madison screamed. She lives to humiliate me. Ryan's voice cracked. Then maybe stop giving her ammunition. Madison's reply was a snarl. You're pathetic. You and your mother deserve each other. Lily pulled the earbuds tighter, but her loyalty had already shifted. For the first time, her stepmother's words didn't just sting, they cemented her allegiance. Late that evening, Helen's phone rang. The caller ID glowed. Ryan. She answered, her tone as even as ever. Yes. His voice was frayed, desperate. Mom, don't do this. Please. We'll lose everything. Helen let the silence stretch, her breathing slow, steady. She could hear his panic filling the void. Finally, she spoke. You already lost me, Ryan. Everything else is paperwork. The knock came at dusk. Firm, urgent, not neighborly. Helen already knew who it was. She poured herself a glass of water, set it on the table, and let them knock again before opening the door. Ryan stood there, his shoulders slumped, his face drawn in exhaustion. Madison clung to his arm, mascara smudged in streaks that looked painted on. Her sobs were too neat, too timed. Helen, Madison choked out, voice trembling just enough for the role she was playing. We're here to apologize, Ryan finished, voice low, eyes pleading. Helen stepped aside, letting them in. Her silence was heavier than words. They sat on her sofa like defendants waiting for sentencing. Madison dabbed her eyes with a tissue, sighing loudly. I've been under stress. Pregnancy hormones, you understand. I didn't mean all those things. Helen remained seated across from them, spine straight, hands folded in her lap. Her face gave nothing. Ryan leaned forward, desperation cracking his voice. Please, Mom, for Lily's sake. She's caught in the middle of all this. Don't take the house from her. Helen reached for her glass, took one slow sip, and set it back down. The tick of the grandfather clock filled the silence. When she finally spoke, her tone was level. You'll stay in the house if you agree to my terms. Madison's head lifted sharply. Terms? Rent, Helen said. As of next month, you'll be tenants. Triple the market rate. Paid on time. No excuses. Madison's eyes widened. Triple? That's extortion. Helen's gaze didn't waver. No, that's business. You wanted me to beg for shelter. Instead, you'll beg to keep yours. Ryan's face crumpled, torn between relief and dread. Madison's mask slipped entirely. The tears dried instantly, replaced by fury. You vindictive old witch, she hissed, rising to her feet. You think you can humiliate me like this? We won't sign anything. Helen slid open the drawer of her side table and withdrew a crisp folder. She placed it gently on the coffee table, her hand resting on it like a gavel. Then you'll be out in 30 days. She pushed the folder forward. Inside, the lease gleamed with fresh ink, her signature already stamped at the bottom. All it needed was theirs. Madison glared down at the folder as if it were a snake. Ryan stared at it like it was salvation. Helen leaned back, her expression unreadable. The choice is yours. The backyard was dressed like a magazine spread. Pastel balloons, gold-foiled banners spelling Baby Carter Furs 2, and a tower of cupcakes so tall it wobbled in the September heat. Madison floated from guest to guest, her dress soft blush, her smile rehearsed. Phones clicked constantly. Every moment was content. Every laugh a caption waiting to happen. But behind the polished surface, whispers threaded the air. Where's Helen? A neighbor asked, sliding a champagne flute from the tray. "You'd think the grandmother would be here." Madison's smile didn't falter, but her tone sharpened just enough. "She's not herself these days. Honestly, she's senile. It's sad, really." Laughter bubbled, polite but uneasy. Someone raised a glass. "To Madison. Holding everything together?" The guests clinked glasses. Madison soaked in the attention, basking in the fiction. She didn't notice Lily at the edge of the patio, frozen. The words hit the girl like a slap, senile, sad. Lily's jaw tightened, her throat thick. She spun on her heel and stormed inside, her sneakers pounding up the stairs. The slam of her bedroom door shook the hallway. Guests turned at the sound, murmurs rising. Madison waved a hand, dismissive. Teenagers. But Lily's absence lingered louder than the toasts. Across town, Helen wasn't scrolling, wasn't watching. She sat at a sunlit cafe table with 3 old friends from her banking days. Their laughter was soft, unforced, the clink of coffee cups steadier than champagne glasses. She told no stories of cruelty, no retellings of insults. She let the conversation drift to books, to gardening, to Lily's latest grades. Peace wasn't absence, it was choice. When the brunch ended, Helen carried a small wrapped box to her car. That evening, when Lily finally appeared at her door, face blotchy from tears she'd hidden, Helen handed her the gift, a leather-bound journal, the kind that smelled of paper and possibility. "Your story matters," Helen said quietly. "Don't let anyone else write it for you." Lily clutched the book like an anchor. For the first time in weeks, her shoulders eased. The next morning, a new notice arrived on Madison's front door. Bold print, stark words. Foreclosure sale. Scheduled 30 days. The paper flapped against the wood in the autumn breeze, a countdown Madison could no longer control. The first call was to the utility company. Helen's tone was clipped, professional, leaving no room for argument. "Yes, the account holder has defaulted. Terminate service effective immediately." One by one, the switches flipped: electricity, gas, water. By sundown, the house Madison boasted about online had gone dark. Inside, chaos bloomed. Madison stumbled through the kitchen, phone flashlight flickering across granite counters. "Unbelievable," she hissed. "We're living like squatters." She went live within minutes, angling the phone so the shadows exaggerated her distress. "Look at this," she cried, sweeping the lens across the blacked-out living room. "We're living in darkness. My baby will be born into this cruelty. My mother-in-law doesn't care if we freeze or starve." She paused, choking on sobs that felt too perfect. "This is elder abuse in reverse." Thousands tuned in. Sympathy hearts floated across the screen. But already, whispers of doubt crept in the comments. Didn't she say her Emil was senile? Something doesn't add up. Meanwhile, Helen mailed a single envelope to their address. No note, no flourish, just a prepaid rental receipt for a storage unit across town. "Your belongings will need a new shelter," her silence implied. At Victor's office, new documents slid into place like chess pieces. "Trust updates are finalized," he said, tapping the papers with a manicured finger. "The estate goes directly to Lily." Helen nodded, her pearl earrings glinting under the fluorescent lights. "And Ryan?" Victor flipped to the addendum. "A single dollar. Legally airtight." Helen's lips curved, not a smile but the shadow of one. Poetic. That night, Lily padded into Helen's kitchen. The generator hummed softly outside, keeping the lights warm and steady here. She clutched her new journal to her chest. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered, "for not giving up on me. For everything." Helen reached out, squeezing her hand gently. "You deserve better than their noise." Lily's eyes glistened, but this time with quiet gratitude, not grief. The next morning, the story broke wider than any live stream. Pregnant woman faces eviction, utilities cut, blared the headline across local news. Madison's crying face filled the screen, her nursery staged behind her, the crib lit only by candles. Her voice shook on camera. "We're victims of cruelty. A bitter old woman is taking everything from us." What she didn't realize was that the world was already digging into her posts, her words, her contradictions. And Helen, sipping tea as the news played in the background, knew the storm was only beginning. The local news piece hit like wildfire. A polished anchor introduced the story. Tonight, a Dallas mother-to-be claims she is being evicted by her own mother-in-law. Utilities cut, foreclosure looming, all while she prepares for the birth of her child. Madison's face filled the screen, cheeks streaked with staged tears, her hand caressing the swell of her belly. "We've lost everything," she whispered to the camera. "We're being punished for no reason." Sympathy flooded in. At first. Then the internet began to dig. A TikTok creator clipped side-by-side videos. Madison's tearful plea on the news against her own Instagram reels from weeks earlier. Her voice in one clip. "Some people just need to disappear. Outdated, irrelevant, gone." The caption burned across the bottom. Guess who she was talking about? Her 67-year-old mother-in-law. Comments rolled in by the thousands. So she mocked her MIL and now plays victim? This doesn't add up. Protect Helen. The hashtag rose, unstoppable. Team Helen. By morning, the recording leaked, the one Helen had quietly passed to Victor. Madison's laugh spilled across millions of screens. "That hag will drop dead before she ever takes this house, and when she does, I'll dance on her grave." The backlash was instant, merciless. Brand partners announced withdrawals. Maternity clothing lines deleted collaborations overnight. One sponsor posted publicly, "We do not support bullying or elder abuse." Madison's curated empire, built on filters and false sweetness, cracked in hours. Inside the Carter house, panic reigned. Madison hurled her phone against the couch cushions, screaming, "They're canceling me! They're calling me a monster!" Ryan rubbed his forehead, scrolling frantically. "Mads, they found everything. The old posts, the comments, it's all over the place." "Delete it!" Madison shrieked. "Delete all of it!" Ryan's fingers shook as he logged in, one account after another vanishing into digital smoke. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. Their brand evaporated with each click. Lily watched from the stairs, her arms crossed, face blank. She didn't need to say anything. The silence was judgment enough. Across town, Helen poured herself coffee and opened her laptop. On the community Facebook page, screenshots of Madison's downfall piled higher by the minute. Neighbors she barely spoke to were tagging each other, sharing clips, leaving comments of solidarity. "Funny how the truth always floats up," one wrote. "She underestimated the wrong woman," another replied. Helen closed the laptop. The world was doing her work for her now. And then came the post that ended the game. A real estate account on Instagram uploaded a photo, a young couple grinning in front of Madison's house, a sold banner draped across the yard. The caption read, "Moving into our dream home, thanks to the most gracious seller." Madison's face drained as she stared at the screen. Her empire was gone, her home slipping away, her name smeared beyond repair. Helen didn't need to gloat. The spotlight had burned Madison alive. Helen sat at her mahogany desk, the smell of ink and roses drifting through the open window. The papers before her weren't just legal forms. They were scripture. Rewriting her family's story, line by line. The scholarship application gleamed at the top, the Thomas Carter Memorial Fund. For young women of promise. Her late husband's name immortalized, no longer tied to Madison's cruelty or Ryan's cowardice, but to opportunity. Helen's pen moved with steady precision, her signature anchoring the page like bedrock. This wasn't charity, it was reclamation. Victor arrived later that afternoon with the estate documents. He set them down with a reverence reserved for verdicts. It's all here. Finalized. Helen flipped to the key page. Beneficiary? Lily Carter. Sole heir. She didn't hesitate. She signed. Ryan and Madison's names appeared only once, beside a token line item. Bequest. $1. The neat cruelty of it pleased her. A legal ghosting. Victor gave a slow smile. You've erased them without ever raising your voice. Helen closed the folder, her pearls catching the light. Noise fades. Ink endures. 2 days later, Ryan's name lit up her inbox. One subject line, you win. The body of the email was empty, save for his name at the bottom. No apology, no attempt to explain. Just surrender typed into pixels. Helen didn't reply. She clicked archive and closed her laptop. Victory didn't need acknowledgement. On Saturday morning, Helen knelt in her garden with a pair of pruning shears, the scent of fresh soil and fertilizer clinging to the air. She planted a new bed of roses, pale pink, the kind her husband had loved. Her knees pressed into the earth, but her back stayed straight. Every thorn she trimmed felt symbolic, cutting away rot, shaping beauty from neglect. Behind her, the screen door creaked. Lily padded out barefoot, journal tucked under her arm. She knelt beside her grandmother, brushing dirt across her palms. Thank you, she whispered. Helen glanced at her. For what? For not disappearing. The words landed like balm. Helen reached out, touched Lily's cheek gently, then turned back to her roses. We don't disappear, Lily. We root. That evening, the mail arrived. Helen sifted through bills, a flyer, and then an envelope thick with legal weight. She slid it open with a letter opener, unfolding the paper with calm hands. Notice of contestation. Petitioner, Madison Carter. Intent, contest for closure. Grounds, undue hardship and familial malice. Helen let the paper rest on her lap. The corner of her mouth curved. Not quite a smile. Even now, Madison was fighting a battle already lost. Victor's email came first thing in the morning, clean and clinical. Like the strike of a gavel. Too late, too public, too broken. The contestation had failed before it even began. Madison's reputation was already ash, her debts exposed, her sponsors gone. Courts dealt in paper and precedent, and Helen owned both. Helen closed the laptop. That part of the story was finished. By noon, sunlight spilled across her dining room table, set for brunch. This wasn't a performance. No curated balloons or rented linens, just fresh croissants, eggs still steaming, and roses from her garden in a chipped porcelain vase. Her guests arrived one by one, old friends from her banking days, a neighbor who'd brought coffee. Lily, carrying her journal tucked under one arm, smiling more freely than she had in months. They gathered, not for spectacle, but for survival. For family, chosen and earned. On the wall behind them hung a new frame. Inside, Helen, Lily, and 3 wide-eyed scholarship students clutching envelopes with the Thomas Carter Memorial seal. Hope captured in a single snapshot. Legacy rewritten in faces that would carry her husband's name further than Madison ever could. There was no trace of Madison or Ryan in the room. No photos, no mementos, no ghosts. The house remembered them only as a warning. Over coffee, Lily leaned close, her voice quiet but steady. Grandma, the house was never the gift, was it? Helen set down her cup, meeting her granddaughter's eyes. No, the house was never the gift. Surviving was. Lily nodded, her eyes shining. You didn't just survive. You redesigned. Helen reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. For the first time in years, her chest felt light. When the guests left and the table was cleared, Helen stood by the window, looking out at the roses swaying in the breeze. She thought of Madison's sneer, of Ryan's silence, of the insult that had started it all. Go beg for a room at a shelter. Helen's lips curved into the faintest smile. And I never begged for shelter again, because I owned the roof above theirs.